My parents were angry when I left and started my own gym. Out of jealousy for my success, they stole from it and damaged it. I don't even know how to begin explaining. Like most people, I didn't get to a life of chaos. Chaos so strong, it was like poison in the air we breathed. My parents weren't good people. I know that sounds harsh, like something you'd hear in a bad movie, but it's the truth. They didn't need to look like monsters. They were experts at being cruel, and they made sure my life was miserable for as long as I can remember. I was their target, both for their words and their fists. My father was a controlling man, someone whose voice alone could fill a room with fear. He wasn't a big guy, short with a bit of a belly and graying hair, but the way he acted made him seem so much bigger. He didn't need to hit me often because his real weapon was his words. He knew how to break me down, make me feel worthless. "You're nothing," he'd say, smiling in that cruel way. "You'll never be more than the dirt under my feet." My mother wasn't any better. If my father was a raging storm, my mother was like a steady rain that never stopped. She was sneaky, always twisting things to make them work for her. To everyone else, she seemed like the victim, always so fragile and afraid. But when no one else was around, she would just sit and watch while my father tore me apart. Sometimes she'd even agree with him, saying things like, "He needs to learn his place." There wasn't a moment of safety in that house. My room became my only escape, but even that didn't block out everything. I still hear them. Yelling, doors slamming, constant accusations. But the worst part was the silence. Silence meant they were planning something to hurt me in a new way. School wasn't any better for me. I was the kid who kept his head down, hoping not to draw attention. I learned early on that people could sense weakness, and the other kids picked up on it quickly. I was always quiet, never fitting in. My clothes never seemed right either. We didn't have much money, or at least that's what I was told. I wore old clothes from cousins I'd never even met, and they never quite fit properly, always too loose or too tight. I remember my first day of school so clearly. I had this tiny hope that maybe, just maybe, school would be a place where I could be different. I had dreams of making friends and escaping the mess that was my home, even if it was just for a few hours. But as soon as I got off the bus, I knew things weren't going to change. The kids looked at me with disgust, whispering behind my back. The teachers, they didn't care at all. I was just another kid, lost in a crowd of faces. So I figured out how to survive. I made myself invisible. I learned to blend I went through the motions, attending classes, doing my homework, keeping my head down. But inside, I was screaming. I needed to escape, to run away from everything and start over. The problem was I had no clue how to make that happen. College became my lifeline, the one way out of that house and away from the misery I had always known. I applied to every college I could find, not caring about the location or the programs. I just needed to get away. When the acceptance letters started to arrive, I was in shock. I finally had options. For once in my life, I could make a choice. But, of course, my parents had to ruin that too. "You're going to community college," my father said, his words filled with disgust. "We're not paying for you to go live somewhere and waste money." I felt trapped, suffocated by their control. I had done everything right, followed all the rules, and yet they still wanted to keep me under their thumb. There were moments when I thought about giving up, about letting them decide my future. But then it hit me. I didn't need them. I didn't need their approval, their money, or their permission. So I left. It wasn't some dramatic escape under the cover of night. I waited until the day after my high school graduation, packed my few belongings, and got into my old car. I didn't say goodbye. They didn't even notice I was gone. The city was supposed to be my fresh start. I found a tiny apartment, just a one-bedroom with creaky floors and paper-thin walls. But it was mine. I paid for it with money I earned from a part-time job at a diner. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough to survive while I figured out my next steps. College wasn't exactly the magical new beginning I had hoped for. I was still the same person, carrying the same baggage from my past, but at least I was free now. No more constant fear, no more tiptoeing around my parents. I could finally breathe, even if that breath was still filled with uncertainty. University wasn't easy, but it was the freedom I had longed for. I didn't have a safety net. While other students could call their parents for help with tuition or textbooks, I was relying on student loans and whatever I could save from my part-time job. The classes were tougher than I expected, and it became clear that I was behind. Most of the other students had spent their high school years preparing for this. Me? I spent mine just trying to survive, but I worked hard. Every night I stayed up late, studying until the early hours of the morning. I couldn't afford to fail because if I failed, there was nothing left for me. So I kept going even when it felt like I was completely overwhelmed, like I was barely staying afloat. Somehow, I pushed through. Then something started to shift. Slowly, I began to improve. My grades got better, and for the first time, I wasn't just invisible anymore. People started to notice me. Professors complimented my work, and classmates even asked me to join their study groups. For once, I felt like I belonged. But of course, life wasn't going to let me have it easy. Just when things were getting better, my father called. I hadn't spoken to him in months, not since I left home. His voice was as cold as ever. "We need you to come back," he said. I actually laughed at the thought of returning to that place after everything I had fought for, but he wasn't joking. He said my mother was sick and needed help. Even after all the hurt they caused me, part of me still felt like I owed them something, but I couldn't go back. I knew if I returned, I'd never be able to leave again. Before I knew it, graduation day came. It was a whirlwind of exams, late night studying, and rushing to finish papers, but I made it. Walking across that stage to get my diploma, I felt something I had never felt before: pride. Not just because of the diploma itself, but because I had actually done it. I had made it out, I had survived everything, but even as I stood at my graduation, moving the tassel across my cap, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't truly free yet. The past still clung to me like shadows always lurking in the background, no matter where I went or what I did. I could change everything in my life, schools, cities, whatever, but those memories still followed me. Now, I'm here in a new city, holding my degree, but with no clear direction. I thought that leaving home would mean I was free. I thought once I escaped, life would be better, but I'm beginning to realize that freedom isn't just about running away. It's something you fight for every single day. I don't know what lies ahead, but I do know one thing for sure. I'm never going back. Not ever. I'll take it one day at a time, but I'm done letting them control me. I'm done being invisible. Now, I'm ready to start living for myself. After graduation, I was hit with a wave of uncertainty. It was strange. I had spent my whole life planning my escape, and now that I was free, it felt unsettling. For the first time, no one was telling me what to do or how to live. It was thrilling, but it was also terrifying. With my degree in hand, I knew one thing: I wasn't going back. I didn't have much money, and the weight of student loans was already creeping in, but I was determined not to let that drag me down. I had a few job offers, not the kind I dreamed of, but better than nothing. So I took one. I became a fitness consultant at a small, struggling gym on the edge of town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. The gym was in rough shape when I got there. It was an old building with worn out equipment and fewer clients showing up every day. The owner, Frank, was close to calling it quit. He had been in the business for over 30 years, but didn't know how to attract new customers. On my first day, I walked into an almost empty space. The flickering lights overhead did nothing to hide the cracks in the floor or the rust on the weights. The gym smelled of sweat and defeat, but instead of feeling discouraged, I was excited by the challenge. This wasn't just a job to me, it was an opportunity. Frank didn't seem too eager to hear my ideas at first. He was set in his old ways and didn't see the point of using social media or doing any real advertising. But I wasn't going to let that hold me back. I started small, making simple changes like updating the gym's outdated website and creating a Facebook page. I knew that to draw people in, the gym had to feel like it was part of the community. I spent my free time brainstorming new ideas, organizing free workout classes in the park, running local promotions, and even planning charity events. Slowly, people started showing up. At first, it wasn't much, just a few new members here and there, but it was a start. I began using the marketing and management skills I had learned from some of the college courses I took. Even though my degree wasn't in business, those classes gave me a solid understanding of how to build something up from scratch. The gym started to feel like more than just a job to me. It became a puzzle I was determined to solve. As business picked up, I found myself taking on more responsibilities. Frank, who had been hesitant about my ideas at first, slowly came around when he saw the gym's numbers improving. For the first time in years, the gym was actually making a profit, even if it was just enough to keep the doors open. After a year, Frank surprised me. He had been talking about retiring for a while, but I never expected him to go through with it. One day, he called me into his office, leaned back in his chair, and said, "I'm too old for this. The gym's doing better now, and that's because of you. I'm ready to sell, and I think you should be the one to buy it." I was speechless. Me? Buy the gym? The thought had never crossed my mind. I was barely making ends meet as it was, and buying a business seemed out of the question. But Frank wasn't asking for much. Frank didn't need the money, he just wanted the gym to be taken care of. "I'll give you a good deal," he said with a smile. "I know you don't have a lot of cash, so we'll set up a payment plan. You can pay me back over the next few years, but there's one thing you have to promise. Keep this place running." I didn't hesitate for a second. This was the opportunity I had been waiting for, and I was ready to take it. I knew it would be tough, but I had already proven that I could turn things around. Now I had the chance to make this gym my own. The following years flew by in a blur of hard work. Owning a business was nothing like working for one. I was in charge of everything: managing the bills, promoting the gym, hiring staff, and keeping clients happy. There was a lot to learn, but I wasn't afraid of the challenge. In fact, I thrived on it. The gym became my world, and I was determined to see it. I worked long days, often 12 hours or more, with barely any time off. I reinvested every dollar I made, upgrading the equipment, giving the walls a fresh coat of paint, and making sure the gym looked better than ever. I brought in a few new trainers who were just as passionate about fitness as I was, and slowly, the gym became a place where people could connect and improve their lives. One of the trainers I hired was Jordan, a recent college graduate with an infectious energy. He was younger than me, but had a natural way with people. His classes were always packed, and he quickly became a favorite among the members. Jordan and I hit it off right away. We both had difficult backgrounds and shared a drive to make something of ourselves. Many nights after the gym closed, we'd stay late, talking about our future goals. Jordan had dreams of opening his own gym one day, but for now, he was happy to help me grow. The gym's reputation grew, and before long, word spread. New members were joining every week. I decided to invest more in advertising, creating targeted ads on social media, and collaborating with local businesses. We even sponsored a few community events. The results were amazing. Within a year, the gym's membership had doubled, allowing me to hire more staff and expand even further. But with success came new problems. As the gym thrived, so did the competition. More gyms began popping up around town trying to cash in on the fitness craze. Some were large chains with far more resources than I had. They had bigger marketing budgets and the latest high-tech equipment. I knew I couldn't match them on those fronts. But my gym had something they didn't: a strong, tight-knit community. People didn't come just for the equipment or flashy features. They came because they felt like they were part of something. That sense of belonging was our edge. And then, everything changed in an instant. It was a Friday evening. The gym was busy as usual. Jordan was leading a class in the back, and I was chatting with a few members at the front desk when I suddenly heard a loud crash. The noise was so startling, it made my heart race. Then, the screaming started. I rushed toward the commotion, my heart pounding. When I reached the back of the gym, the sight in front of me stopped me cold. Jordan was on the floor, unconscious. One of the large weight machines had collapsed, and it had fallen directly on top of him. Blood was pooling around him. Everything after that felt like a blur. Someone called for an ambulance, and we did our best to help him while waiting for the paramedic. But it was clear that he was in bad shape. His leg was crushed, and he had a serious head wound. I watched, numb with shock, as they loaded him into the ambulance and sped off to the hospital. I followed the ambulance, my thoughts spinning out of control. How could this have happened? The equipment was new. We had just upgraded it a few months ago. I had made sure everything was set up properly, following all safety precautions, but still, something had gone terribly wrong. Jordan was in surgery for hours. I sat in the waiting room, sick with worry, hoping he would pull through. Finally, a doctor approached me and said Jordan was stable, but his injuries were severe. He had suffered a traumatic brain injury, and his leg was so damaged that they weren't sure if he would ever walk again, let alone continue as a trainer. The guilt was crushing. I couldn't stop blaming myself. What if I had double-checked the equipment? What if I had been more careful? Maybe then this wouldn't have happened. The weeks that followed were some of the darkest I've ever faced. The gym was still running, but without Jordan, it just didn't feel the same. The accident left a deep impact on everyone. Some of the members were scared after what happened and decided to leave, worried the gym wasn't safe anymore. I did everything I could to win their trust back, hired inspectors to go through each piece of equipment, made sure every safety standard was met, and upgraded anything that needed it. But the damage had already been done. Thankfully, Jordan pulled through, but he was changed. His leg would never fully recover, and he faced months of grueling physical therapy. The doctor said he might walk again, but his days as a trainer were over. It was heartbreaking to watch someone so full of energy, someone who lived for fitness, now struggling just to move. I visited him every day at the hospital. We talked about everything, life, the gym, and the future. He kept telling me not to blame myself, but the guilt was impossible to ignore. I made a promise to him right then and there. I would keep the gym going, and I would turn it into something bigger and better than ever. Not just for me, but for him too. With that promise in mind, I threw myself back into the gym, determined to make it thrive. I wasn't just doing it for myself anymore. I was doing it for Jordan and for everyone who had supported me from the beginning. I worked harder than I ever had before, investing in better equipment, hiring more trainers, and pushing the gym to grow, and it worked. Over time, the gym became something I never imagined it could be. It wasn't just a small local spot anymore. It was a destination. People from all over the city came to be part of the community we had built. We started winning awards, getting featured in fitness magazines, and soon enough, we were the top gym in town. But with success came new challenges. The pressure was constant. I found myself working all the time, trying to stay ahead of the competition. I hardly had any time for myself. Sure, the gym was thriving and the recognition was nice, but I was starting to feel lost in the process. Was this really what I wanted? I wasn't so sure. Then came the second major event that would shake everything up again. One night after the gym had closed, I got a call from one of the trainers. There had been a break-in. I raced to the gym, my heart pounding, unsure of what I'd find. When I got there, my worst fears were realized. The place had been wrecked, equipment lay overturned, shattered mirrors littered the floor, and the front desk was completely destroyed. The destruction wasn't the only thing that rattled me. Across the walls, someone had spray-painted threatening messages. "You won't last, we'll take you down, and this is just the start." It was clear this wasn't just mindless vandalism. Someone was targeting me directly. I had no idea who would do this, but it was obvious that they meant to scare me. Standing in the middle of the wreckage, I realized that someone was out to ruin everything I had worked for. Sleep was impossible that night. All I could see were those broken mirrors, the trashed equipment, and those ominous words staring back at me. This wasn't random. Whoever did this wanted to send a clear message. I felt vulnerable and angry, unsure of where to turn. The police came by, took their notes, and asked a few routine questions, but I could tell they weren't going to do much. To them, it was just another case of vandalism. I knew I couldn't just rely on them, so I decided to take things into my own hands. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. That's when I decided to hire a private investigator. After digging through recommendations and doing my own research, I found Greg Turner. He had a solid reputation for being relentless when it came to uncovering the truth. I knew he was the right person to help me figure out who was behind this. Greg wasn't the warm and friendly type. When we met in his office, a place cluttered with case files and papers, he got straight to business. He was in his late 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. "Sounds personal," he said after I explained the situation, jotting down notes. "Anyone you've upset recently?" I shook my head, trying to think. "I run a gym. I'm not exactly out there making enemies." Greg smirked. "You'd be surprised. People have grudges over the strangest things. I've seen it all." No grudge is ever too small to overlook. Over the next few weeks, Greg dove deep into the investigation. He started by talking to my employees, the gym members, and anyone who might have been around during the night of the break-in. He pulled security footage, reviewed local surveillance, and even took a look at my business dealings to see if anyone I'd crossed paths with recently could be behind it. But nothing came up. Whoever did this knew exactly how to cover their tracks. Greg, however, wasn't someone who gave up easily. He was thorough, calling me with updates that seemed to only lead to more dead ends. He even investigated rival gyms, thinking maybe they wanted to see mine fail. But still, there were no solid leads. As weeks turned into months, my hope started to fade. The gym was running again, the damage repaired, the equipment replaced, the walls freshly painted, but the fear lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever had done this was still out there, watching. I felt uneasy, unsure when the next attack would come. Then one day, Greg called me to his office. His voice had a sense of urgency that I hadn't heard before. "I found something," he said, "but you're not going to like it." I rushed to his office, my heart pounding. When I got there, Greg didn't waste time. He slid a folder across the desk toward me. Inside were photographs, documents, and notes from his investigation. As I flipped through them, my eyes landed on a set of familiar faces. My parents. My mind went blank. "This can't be possible," I muttered, unable to process what I was seeing. "It's not them." Greg leaned back in his chair, calm but firm. "It is. I checked everything. All the signs point to them. Your parents are behind this." I sat there stunned. My parents? The very people I had tried to distance myself from my whole life? The ones who had controlled and manipulated me for years? They were the ones trying to sabotage my gym, the one thing I had built on my own, Greg explained further. After all the other leads went cold, he decided to look into my family's background. It didn't take long to uncover the truth. My parents were in deep financial trouble. Gambling debts, unpaid loans, and shady business ventures had pushed them to the edge, and they were desperate. That desperation had led them here to try and tear down everything I had worked for. They were running out of money, and what Greg found next left me speechless. My parents had been keeping tabs on me ever since I left. They knew all about the gym, about how well it was doing, and they couldn't stand it. After years of trying to keep me under their control, they couldn't handle the fact that I had built something on my own and succeeded. It must have eaten them alive to see me thrive. That's when they decided to destroy everything I had worked for. Greg uncovered phone records, emails, and even found a witness who had seen my father lurking near the gym on the night of the break-in. The pieces fit together perfectly. I felt anger boiling inside me. All the years of their abuse, the torment, and now this. They weren't satisfied with breaking me down in the past. They wanted to ruin me completely, even now. I wanted to drive over and confront them, scream at them for all the pain they had caused, but Greg pulled me back. "If you go now, they'll just deny it," he said calmly. "We need to handle this the right way." So we took everything to the police. Greg had compiled enough evidence to make a strong case, and this time, the police took it seriously. They opened a full investigation, and within weeks, my parents were arrested. Seeing their faces on the news, their mugshots flashing across the screen, it didn't feel real. I thought I'd feel satisfaction, but instead I just felt numb. These were the people who raised me, and now they were in handcuffs, being charged with trying to destroy everything I had built. But it wasn't over yet. I still had to face them in court. The trial was messy. My parents denied everything, claiming the evidence was fake, that they had nothing to do with the break-in. But Greg's investigation was rock solid. He had everything. The phone calls, emails, witness statements, all neatly laid out. My father even had the audacity to play the victim, telling the court that I had abandoned them and that they had just wanted to reconnect. It was disgusting to watch. Their lies, their manipulation, they were willing to say anything to avoid responsibility. The trial dragged on, their high-priced lawyer doing everything possible to defend them. But in the end, the truth won. The jury found them guilty of conspiracy to commit vandalism and damage to my gym. They were ordered to pay for the damage they had caused. It wasn't about the money. It was about finally seeing them face the consequences for what they had done. For once, they couldn't slip away without being held accountable. When the verdict was announced, my parents didn't even glance in my direction. They just stared ahead, their expressions cold and indifferent, as if I didn't exist. I had hoped, just for a moment, that they might show some sign of regret. Something to indicate they understood how badly they had hurt me, but there was nothing. No remorse, no acknowledgement. They never cared, and they still didn't. After the trial, I walked out of the courthouse feeling strangely hollow. I had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. Seeing my parents punished didn't bring the closure I thought it would. If anything, it made me feel more isolated, like I had finally severed the last connection to my past, leaving me completely on my own. The money they were ordered to pay, it didn't matter. The gym was thriving, and I had already repaired the damage they had caused. What mattered was that they were finally being held responsible for their actions. That gave me some small sense of peace. In the months that followed, I buried myself in work. The gym was expanding, so much so that I opened a second location in a nearby city. I hired new trainers, upgraded the equipment, and launched more classes. Business was booming, and I stayed busy, throwing myself into the day-to-day operations. But no matter how successful the gym became, the weight of everything that had happened still lingered in the background. There were nights when it all caught up to me. The pain, the betrayal, it was still there, gnawing at me when I least expected it. I had built a life that looked perfect on the outside, but inside, something still felt incomplete. Eventually, I decided to do something I had resisted for a long time. I started going to therapy. For years, I had avoided it because I didn't want to face the pain of my past. I didn't want to dig up the trauma or talk about the anger I had buried deep inside. But after everything with my parents, I realized I couldn't carry that burden alone anymore. Therapy wasn't easy. At first, it felt impossible to open up, to talk about the hurt I had carried for so long. But little by little, I began to heal. I started to understand that the abuse I had endured wasn't my fault. What my parents had done to me wasn't a reflection of who I was. It was about them. And for the first time, I began to let go of the guilt and shame that had weighed me down for so many years. I came to understand that my success wasn't just about proving them wrong. For so long, My driving force had been the desire to escape, to create something that would show my parents I wasn't the failure they always believed I would be. But now, it was different. I wanted to build something for myself, something that brought me joy and made me feel fulfilled, not just out of spite, and that's exactly what I did. 1 year after the trial, I opened my third gym. It was my largest venture yet, equipped with the latest machines, a smoothie bar, and even a small spa area. It was everything I had dreamed of. And for the first time, I felt like I had truly achieved something meaningful. It wasn't about the money or success, it was about creating something that was entirely mine, something no one could ever take away. My parents never fully paid the amount they owed. They tried to appeal the court's decision, dragging out the legal process for as long as possible. But in the end, it didn't matter. I had already moved on. I had built a life that was stronger than anything they could destroy, and I wasn't going to let their unfinished business hold me back. Now, as I sit here reflecting on it all, I feel a calm I never thought was possible. My gym is thriving. My life is full of positivity, and I'm surrounded by people who genuinely care about me. They uplift me, not tear me down. The journey to this point wasn't easy. It was full of hurt, betrayal, and setbacks, but I made it through. I survived. And for the first time in my life, I feel free.